Hello, welcome back. Last time I did signal divider and sequence indexer, and sequence sorter would be next. You might notice it's already solved. This video right here is an alternate to the footage where I actually solved this. Because what happened there is that I ended up with a monster-sized recording session, which edited down to still a monster-sized video, so my recording session was 4 hours, 16 minutes. Edited footage using my normal process, the way I would ordinarily edit these things, making the decisions with what to keep in, ended up with still 2 hours, 40 minutes or something like that. So I thought about what to do with that. I couldn't really just reduce it down to a reasonable length and keep the same content in. I am fairly certain that there exist groups of people both who want to see the entire process of solving and also just a summary and not, spend their entire day watching it and see what I did. So I decided the best thing to do is to provide just alternate takes for both those groups of people. So this is the summarized version where I'll describe what I did and not take an entire day to do it, pretty much. So there are two copies of the program here because I had an in-progress one here. This is very unfinished. I made a copy at this point because I wanted to do some major surgery to it and not risk losing everything, so I would have a thing to copy from. So this is the... It does that sometimes. Whoa, okay, it just took a moment to load, I see. So, anyway, so this is the successful one. This loaded. You'll notice that this uses a lot of instructions. My instruction count was very high for this. However, if you look at my statistics, cycle count actually beat the average. So my cycle count was good, node count was high, that's fine, because I used 2 extras for some stuff. Wow, somebody has a 6 nodes, or however many nodes, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4 node solution? I have a hard time imagining this. I would love to see what this solution looks like. Instruction count was very high, yes, because I used a lot of instructions. So this is apparently a very notorious puzzle. This is what Randy's debug message says, by the way, in case you want to see it. Anyway, yeah, so sequences are 0 terminated. Read a sequence from in, sort the sequence, write the sequence to out. So you get 67, 27, 86, 15, 0. You have to write 15, 27, 67, 86, 0. So ascending order, unsigned integers, unsigned non-zero integers, terminated by zeros. So just a bunch of these sequences, sort them into the appropriate order. So yeah, you get 2 stacks, input comes in here, output goes out here. So my initial read of this was that I wanted to implement something kind of like an insertion sort. If I'm just implementing a sorting algorithm in any random piece of code, insertion sort is usually my first choice. I always have to look up how to do it, but once I do, it's relatively simple. It doesn't quite end up working that way in this language. So anyway, I realized that input had to come in here. These 2 stacks would have data flowing back and forth from them, similarly to the last 2 puzzles that I did with that involved stack memory nodes. And I just have to do some stuff in between to insert new values at the appropriate place. So basically, like, a value would go in, another value would come in and need to be compared with every value in the stack. So that necessitates pulling out all the values, at least short of the ones that need to go ahead of the new value that's coming in. Do a comparison to figure out which number is greater, then put them back in that order, and then repopulate with the stuff you pulled out. Something like that. So what I'm going to do here is attempt to go through my finished program and show how it works. The biggest constraint that I had here was instruction space. Again, you'll notice I have completely filled these 3 nodes, and almost completely filled these 3 nodes. I have one empty one that has 1 instruction, and one that's mostly empty. So at the beginning of this, let's make one step. Okay, so at the beginning of this, I initialize this with a 0, and initialize this with a 0. So everybody's 0 terminated. These sequences are, my stacks are too. So somebody puts a 0 into here initially. Who does that? You do. Your register is a 0 right now. At the start, you put a 0 in there. So 0 goes here, 0 goes here. Everybody else is just waiting for a message to do something. So this guy right here is the central dispatcher. The segments of my program are central dispatcher here handles all messaging from along this route, along this route, and along this route. So information flows in here. New values come in that need to be inserted. This one does no insertion into this stack other than one special little hack I did here. So this is the only move that goes to the down. It does pull a value out. So your job is to receive the new number that goes in and send it over here. So these two nodes are what process the comparison and decide when a thing needs to be inserted. So in order to compare, you need the new number that comes in and any old number that was in the stack. So basically a number comes in here and goes over there, sits in here, or in here actually, until I've pulled enough out of this stack that that it receives a value that, okay, so one of the hardest things to keep straight about this is which way I'm inserting and like what is in this stack. Let's talk about what happens when I reach a 0 at the end of a sequence before I talk about what happens in between. So anyway, I read some values, these guys process them. This stack eventually ends up with basically the list just like this in reverse order since it's LIFO. So you get 15, 27, 67, 86, 0. At some point, this node gets a signal, the one right next to output, to just read all the values from here and empty them down there, reinitialize everything and start the process. So the end state that I want with this stack is, again, 0, 86, 67, 27, 15. I said it in the other order that time. So anyway, in order to achieve that, this is the temporary storage up here for the values that I have pulled out of this in order to compare with new ones that come in. So every time I pull a value out of that, well, let's see what this does first. So every time I pull a value out of this, it needs to go to two places. It needs to go to the comparator, where it will be used as a just to compare with this value, which is a sticky value in here, and also needs to go onto this stack, because when I pull one out, that is a destructive action. I pull it out of the stack memory node, I pop it off, and it's gone. It's in your register now. So I preserve it by putting it in here in the other order. Then it also splits off this direction for comparation. So this value, this 27 that came, no, the 67 that came from there, has been read by you. It is not a 0, so it's not the end of a sequence. So I'm going to shuffle it off to the left. So you get your first value, and you move that down here. So this is where the new value coming in sticks around. So this node holds onto it. And then this one waits for... It does a swap. Yeah, so it saves it into the back buffer. Things are happening here, don't worry yet. So it saves it in its back buffer and waits for a new message from this node. So now that I've handled the new input coming in, you've already pulled out an old thing. At this point it's 0 because you have nothing in you. The stack is empty. So you got a 0. I always move the 0 over to the right. Oh boy, a lot of stuff is happening. I don't see that 0. I guess, let's see, it was there a moment ago and now it is here. If it is 0, which it is, then you're going to go to, so term 2, all of my labels got very compact because I needed to fit them on the same line as instructions and stuff. So let's see, what do my labels mean? Pop means pull something off of this stack and put it into your register. term 2 means the second kind of terminate. I'm terminating the loop of reading from here because I reached the bottom of this stack. Term 1 means that I actually got the end of the sequence from being read up there, but we're not there yet. This is wait. You're waiting for some stuff. This is start, this is start, this is start. Okay, so I used ST in a lot of places. Anyway, this is reset, this is refill. So you'll hear a lot about refilling. When I use the word refill, what I mean is pull everything that I've saved away in here and put it back onto this stack. So basically rearrange the stuff that I had squirreled away temporarily for the next iteration of pulling stuff off of here, whether to compare and squirrel away and refill, or to just dump it out of the output. Anyway, so where am I right now? I'm at term 2. So I reached the end, the bottom of this stack, and no comparing actually really happened here. I put a value over here, but you don't actually care about it. Although you kind of do. Now hang on, so I move a -1 to the left. So this is sort of a special case where the comparator, instead of comparing, just needs to send its value off to storage. So this is store instead of comparing. So that's what the -1 signal here means. If less than 0, then term 2, so I'm sharing label space with that. While that is going on, some stuff is happening over here. Don't worry about that yet. Just know that refill logic is happening here. So whatever's on this stack is going to end up back here. So move -1 down. Yeah, so if you get a -1, then just send it downward as your signal for what to do next, and go back to your loop, where you're reading, go back to your initial loop where you're reading a new value from here. So the -1 signal goes down here. Again, term 2, just store your value instead of comparing. Well, you actually move a 0. So this 0 doesn't make it all the way from here to here. This 0 here is a signal to this guy, I think? Or no, this guy here. That'll make sense when I get to the refill logic. It's the signal to that you've emptied this stack here. So both of them just have a 0 on their bottom. So they terminate just like this does. So anyway, so I'm here, you've put a 0 on there, and then you want to swap, and then in order to just make the instructions work, this initialization instruction is also overloaded to be the instruction that moves, that stores the value from here. So it stores. So now I have 0, 67. I have pulled a 67 off of there, done no actual comparing because you reached the bottom of the stack, then I stored it there. So, a 27 wants to come in. However, I'm in a refill loop over here. On the next iteration, I'll talk about, actually no, the one after that, I'll talk about how refill works. So just know that these two are doing some refilling until they hit the 0. Move -1 left, move right, nil. Okay, so you were waiting for a signal from this guy, which you just gave with that move 0 to the left. So that number doesn't matter. That could be literally any number at all. It just has to wait for anything to proceed. All right. So you jump to wait, you jump to start. I actually was able to write out start all the way there, I guess, because up is short. An annoyance here. Right is 5 characters long. Up is 2 characters long. Depending on which direction I want to move stuff, I have a different amount of horizontal space to fit stuff, so I might have to compact my labels more if the right port is involved. So move right would be the worst for that, because there's no abbreviating that. You just have to abbreviate labels. And you can do JRow instead of labels if you want. One optimization I thought about doing here is I think I could use JRow a little bit more to save on all the labels and compare conditional jumps. You'll see the interplay between these two. I think I could save some instructions and possibly some cycles that way, if I wanted to optimize. But I just wanted to get any solution, and since it took over 4 hours just to get a solution, I didn't even have optimization on my mind at all. Anyway, so great. So the stack looks like that. This is the state change that has happened in that entire cycle. So one full cycle of reading input has happened. So you have now read a 27. It is not 0. This is not the end of the sequence yet. Oh, by the way, you get a 0 length sequence at the end here, so you do have to be sure your logic actually handles that. Anyway, so I've already handled a 0 length sequence being pulled from here, but not from here yet. So 27 goes over here and gets stuck into this register as the sticky value of, when I say the words sticky value, it just means something that I've read and can reread multiple times. Because like if I read input twice, I'll get 2 different values. Sometimes I need to read the same value multiple times. So usually I either, if I know how many times I'm going to write it back out, I'll just count those and move it that many times. If I don't know that, then I'll usually wait for a signal here, which is what this does. So I either tell this that I want to read that value back, and then I read from it, or I tell it something else. So anyway, 27 is here. 67 has already been pulled off of the stack. That happened while you were processing. So move down into ACK, move there. So now the 67 goes over here. And finally, right, you're waiting for a signal. You have just received, have you not? Move ACK right. Oh, to the right, sorry. Since you pulled something off the stack, it needs to be ready for a refill up here. Again, I'll get to the refill logic. I'm not there yet. Anyway, so the 67 goes over here. So finally, I actually have a, it's not 0, so I actually need to do a comparison. So I send the signal 0 down here, which is the signal for give me back the value, the sticky value that you've stored in your back buffer. So you get the 0. Do some comparisons to see which signal it is, swap back up here, and then send it on. So you're interested in that so that you can do a subtraction. That's how you compare in this language, basically. Subtract one number from another, then see if you're over or under 0. Or equal to 0 if you need to do equality, which this does not really. So if it is greater than 0, so if the numbers are in one order or another, I guess that means that the old value was more than the new one. Then, oh boy, I went back and forth on this so many times. This jugs changed into a joules and back to a jugs like many times over the lifetime of writing this program. Because I couldn't decide like which way I wanted to sort. That was one of the hardest parts of this to keep in my head. But anyway, so if it is greater than 0, I decided that that is the case where I want to insert the new value in the middle of the stream of values that I've been writing to the stack memory node. So, I mean, that makes sense, because you know your output needs to have 27 before 67, but 67 comes in before 27. So you know that when you get to this, you need to rearrange something. So anyway, the principle of this sorting algorithm is that this stays sorted the entire time I'm operating on it. When I want to insert a new value, I put it in the appropriate place that is already sorted. So I never just like take this entire list in here and then sort it. I sort it in line while I'm doing that. So that's what I mean when I say this is kind of like a modification of the insertion sort. Just from the name, you can tell, you know, you sort on insertion. If you're actually implementing insertion sort in a high-level language, it's a little bit different than this. But this is how I did it in this language. Anyway, so right, I want to insert. This was the hardest part of this to get right. Does some complicated stuff. What exactly do you do? You're going back to loop 2. Wait, why are you doing that? Okay, so you have just written your value up here. Anyway, so you want to insert, so you're sending a 1 signal down here. You've swapped that back to the back buffer, just so it's stored safely, so the value stays sticky. Then you are listening for the next signal, which is 1. So you've received your signal. Complicated things happen here. So let's go through this before I actually step it. So greater than 0 is ints. Oh, I could change that back to insert. I have space now. This line was longer at one point. Anyway, ints means insert. So you'll end up here. where you just swap and jump back to the start? Yes. So you want to write this value. Oh, hey, check it out. I could just put insert here and save an instruction. Do I dare? When I stop this, I will improve it by doing that. Because yeah, this whole thing is unnecessary. I could just jump straight here and that'll automatically restart. Nice. Okay. So that's cool. I found an optimization. Anyway, so it just wants to swap and write its value. Yeah, so this is just the same as this is not the same as term 2 because that also needs to move a 0 in there. But the rest of it is the same. This is just write your value. Okay, so store this value there. I thought I needed to do more work, but I had to actually do that more work later. So here's the real problem, the biggest issue that I had trouble solving here. I haven't even gone through the refill logic yet, but we'll get there. So these need to go in the opposite order. Because if you just store 27 in there, then 67 is going to be put in later, because refill takes a moment to get there. What I actually want to do is just swap two values as they go in here. Well, you know what? Let's not talk about that part yet. Let's break this down into other components. Anyway, so I want to store it in here, do the insert however it needs to happen. I'll talk about the value swapping later. So yeah, it just stores it and goes back to what it was doing. Essentially the same thing as it did for the initial case. Okay. Anyway, so this sends a 9 signal to the right. What does 9 mean? It's complicated. Yeah, so this is where things get really hairy. Let's ignore that for now. Anyway, so I've inserted. You just want to wait for this guy to tell you you're ready for something again. Do you really need to do that? I think I might have found another inefficiency. Term 2, move -1 left, move right nil, jump start. You just want to move right down. I think I can get rid of an instruction here. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I can eliminate this and this. No more waiting there, because you'll be waiting for this anyway. You're jumping back to start. Yeah, okay, cool. So I can move my insert down to there to save an instruction, but not a cycle. Yes, that does save 2 instructions actually, and one thing here. It's probably bottlenecked on something else, so that I doubt that'll impact my cycle count, but it'll fix my instruction count slightly. And yeah, I can not have you wait extra on this, because this doesn't mean anything. That's just to get past that. Anyway, so a -2 came through here. Is the -2 signal the one that... No, that's just a special refill. So it's telling this to refill in a way that also swaps some values around here. So I'll get to that last. I still need to go through refill logic and stuff. Anyway, so I've inserted a value. This is refilling. You just need to wait for your next whatever. And this is waiting on that to finish its refills. Right. So the next iteration is going to be a good one for going over the refill logic. So I'll just let this finish what it's doing, then we'll look at what it actually is when the 86 goes in. Okay, so 86 went in. 86 comes over here, gets stuck in the sticky value spot. 27 got pulled out since that was at the top of the stack. So 27 goes in here for comparating. And so also, all right, so let's start looking at the refilling logic. Well, so hang on. Will 86 just want to... No, let's keep looking at this. So we saw an insert. Let's see a non-insert. Let's see the code path here that happens when I don't need... Well, isn't that the same thing? insert, move -9 right. So wait, you are inserting the 86? Yes, of course you are. Okay, well, anyway, so that's the same thing again. All right, so let's start looking at this node. It pulls a signal from the left to the right. Now, this is a very tricky spot in here because it needs to listen for 4 different signals. And since I have jump less than 0, jump equal to 0, and something for greater than 0, I have to do some extra work if I want more than 3 different branches here. So -1 and -2 have different meanings when they go in here. But if it gets a positive number, it just means it's something I want to store up there. So let's watch for when that happens. So it pulls out a 67, shuffles it off to the right. So you have moved the 67 over here. This is a signal processor. So this node reads whatever this thing has received and does whatever work it needs to do to translate it. Yes, this is a signal translator. This translates the input of this to something that this can understand in a 3-branch conditional, basically. So you have gotten a 67, which is a positive number, so jump greater than 0, you just want to send it up there. So send passes it back unchanged. All right, so my translation has given me back the same value. It is not less than 0, it's not equal to 0, so I just want to move it up here. So that's how putting values onto this stack works. Then you wait for your next signal. So next signal is going to be one of these -9s. Well, you understand -9 as that, apparently. Okay, so -9 from here to here just means pop another value off the stack. Keep looking for something that I can compare with the value that's in me. Yeah, so that's what happens here, right. So you didn't need to insert. Yeah, you didn't insert. I was misreading this. It's not inserting the 86. So yeah, when it gets a value, it needs to keep on popping values off until it finds one that's greater. Because again, this is in sorted order, so it needs to search around for the spot where it needs to insert its thing. It does need to be inserted at some point, because this value always will end up in here somehow. You never discard it, so it has to go in somewhere. It either gets inserted somewhere before the end, which is different, or it actually goes in once this is empty. So those two are the two different ways that control flow can go, because they have to be handled in a different way. And do they? I think so, yeah. Anyway, so you're popping off another value. It is 0 at this point, and I do send a 0 over here, so that's your next signal. So it's not greater than 0, but it is equal to 0. When the 0 comes, it means you have reached the end of this stack, so you need to start refilling these values back down here. So you go to Jez refill. Let's not worry about what this guy's doing yet. But I do need to figure out... No, we've already gone over term 2. We saw that when the 67 was going in, so you know what's going on there, if you can remember. Anyway, so refill happens. I send back a 0, so this is another signal that comes in and goes back the same way. It is 0, so you want to go to refill. So I tell you that you will be refilling. This is where you listen to the... Now, this signal processor sets an extra flag here that this one reads, which has to do with swapping these two values around. Let's not get to that part of the logic just yet. It's complicated. It is 0, so you just want to move on to refill. So on refill... Oh, you've already pulled a value here, right. So in the refill loop, you send a signal, sure. This is the start of refill, this is refill loop, refill pull a value from here and move it down. And once it's gotten to 0, then you need to terminate. But if it's greater than 0, if there are still more values to pull, then just keep on looping. Pull from here, send to here. Pull from here, send to here. This does something fairly similar. So yeah, equal to 0... No. Not less than 0, not equal to 0. Yes, equal to 0, because it got the 0 from here. Oof. A lot of signaling going on here. It's hard to keep straight. Anyway, so you move... No, you don't do that. We did not go through this part of the control flow. This is the swap. Don't worry about it yet. So we got to refill. Yes, equal to 0, jump to refill. So pull a value from here. If it's 0, then go back to your thing. If it's not 0, then you want to end up here. This was another instruction compacting thing I needed to do, because this needed to fall through and move ACK to the left. You also need down here to move what you've read from here to the left. So this is just like sharing an instruction. I needed to overlap that to fit this, because as you can see, I used all my instructions here. Anyway, so pull a value from here, move it there. Very simple. So just pull from here, move there. Pull from here, move there. Until you hit 0, until you hit 0, which is going to happen soonish. So right, pull that. Still greater than 0, so the 27's moving over. You pulled the 0, you're ready to move it down. You're not greater than 0, so you are at this point... You've already moved the 0 down. You've gotten it. You've gone back to your loop because you're done with your job. You need to reinitialize this with a 0 so that it'll have its terminator the next time I empty it. And then tell this, again, this 0 means nothing. This is just, hey, I'm done with my work. You can go on with yours now. Because this needs to be fully refilled before I start operating on it again. Because I'm going to be popping values off for comparison. Anyway, so you jump to wait, and everything restarts. So now let's look at this extra weird logic where I have to swap two values. I have trouble explaining why I need to swap values, but on insert, basically insert needs to go one before or one after or something, the value that gets on there, the first value that gets on there from refilling. So that's why you do something special. So when the 15 comes in, let's just watch what it does. So it gets stuck there. I've pulled off the 27 for comparison, sent it off there as normal. 27 is compared with 15, right? So I tell you, give me your value, then I subtract it, so I end up with 12, and I do, in fact, want to insert the 15. So that means... Yeah. That means that 15 needs to go in. Oh, also, this only empties itself as far as it needs to get to an insert. Then it stops emptying and inserts and refills from there. So it doesn't fully empty it every single time. It just goes until it reaches the spot where this new value needs to go. Because there's just no need to empty it all the way. So we are inserting. Listen to signal, which is 1, and then move 9 to the right. So this 9 signal here is telling you that you need to, so it looks like just any 0 or greater number means this is telling this, hey, I'm inserting stuff, you need to handle that. So we've already seen what that does, it just sticks the 15 in there. So move -2 to the right. So here's where the fourth signal comes in. So when a -2 goes there, it gets sent to the signal interpreter. Greater than 0 send, equal to 0 refill, it's neither of those. So now I need to differentiate between -1 and -2. -1 means, let's see, term 2, that's end of this stack, so it just needs to refill. But -2 means an insert has happened. So it's not equal to 0, so this is the fourth signal here. So I turn -2 into a 0, so you interpret that as a refill, but you do a special thing. You move a 1 down here instead of a 0 in that case. So that's the flag that gets passed on to this node when it enters its refill loop, so that it knows how to, so you move 1 down, so this enters the refill loop. So this knows how to, so it didn't do the jez here. you need to pull out this 15, get it out of there, and swap it with the thing that's coming in here. Again, it's really hard to explain how this works, especially since I'm not sure I even understand it. I just saw that something's wrong with my program. If I swapped these two values around, it would be correct. So I implemented the logic to just switch their positions. Yeah, so this is where the overloaded instruction comes in. So I want to move the ACK to the left in riffle 2. You jump over that riffle 2 instruction straight to riffle. Anyway, so I move the 15 in. And now you need to listen to this, which is a 0, because you reached the end of that. Okay, yeah, so anyway, you inserted that in the first two go in reverse order. Everything else goes in the same order. So it goes back to normal refilling. All right, and that's how refilling works. And with that, I've read an entire sorted sequence. So now you get a 0 from here. Right, so term 1 here happened. I feel like I've already missed something. Yeah, so a -1 is going over here. Right, that's the other, what I was calling the fourth signal. So this is the third signal, the one I haven't talked about yet. Term 1 happened because it was a jez from reading this. So 0 comes in here, it jumps over to term 1 and sends a -1 signal over here. Then waits for something from here and is going to stick it in there. I'll explain that momentarily. So -1 comes in, goes to the signal interpreter. So that's where the jez here is. So it is equal to 0. Then I translate it back to a -1 and go back to the start. So I want to finish. Finish means move -1 to the down, which tells this, I want to dump the entire contents of this to the output. So Jill's fin, and then wait for you to tell me something. Pull a value, move a value. Wait for 0. Pull a value, move a value, wait for 0. So it's very similar to what you were doing before. Anyway, so once you hit 0, here's a little hack because I ran out of instruction space in these three. I used to have this moving a 0 back into here to initialize it for the next run, just like I do with the 0 from this to initialize this for the next refill. And then signaling to this to continue. I realized that I could overload those two things, have the signal flow up here, since you previously were just discarding it. You were just moving right to nil. So the signal is 0. It flows up here. This moves it over there, and then this actually puts it back into the stack. So that's how I fit this in. Again, instruction space was at an extreme premium here. Like, yeah, fitting everything in was the hardest thing here. But I did spot a couple of spaces where I can remove some. Okay, and then it just starts in the next sequence because it output that properly, and everything else runs the same. I think I explained every part of that program. Yeah, the only part that I never actually could understand in words was like why I had to, when I insert, had to swap the top two values on the stack. But I saw that I had to, so getting the signal over here was the tricky thing there. So I wonder if I could have this use send back an instruction offset, so a J row over here, instead of doing all of this stuff. So like my signals then, instead of like those numbers, become instruction offsets. So I could save some conditional jumps, possibly. That would be another possible optimization. I'm not sure it would actually work and save me anything though. Okay, yeah, so that, again, the toughest part here was figuring out how to swap those two values. I tried signaling like through this, but this is my main storage. I can't just like arbitrarily put something else on here that's not a stored number and expect it to go to the right place and all just work. Yeah, and this was the node where I felt the most instruction pressure because you're the central dispatcher. You ferry messages around to everybody. I also find it amusing that unloading just a little bit of signal processing here almost entirely filled this node because it also had to send the extra flag down here. So it's 0 if you're refilling without swapping. It's 1 if you're refilling and swapping the first two. Yeah, so this was fun. Also, I had at one point during debugging, I had some numbers disappearing from here. It was hard to make sure that they all made it from here back into here. That took a bunch of my time. So yeah, if you want to see the entire process of solving this, I've already spent 40 minutes just going over this without even writing a single line of code. This puzzle is a monster. It's beautiful though. I love it. This is extremely satisfying to get done. Yeah, this feels like an ultimate puzzle, but there is one more outside of TIS-net yet to go, and then there is all of TIS-net. Anyway, cool. So yeah, running random test, just going to work like everything else. That's what those look like. All right, so I spotted some possible improvements. I'm not going to mess with them right now. That'll be an exercise for me on my own. But yeah, there were definitely a couple of... I mean, this one's simple enough. I can just do it. So that's done. And you know what? You know what? The other one's simple too. You don't need to do this at all, and you don't need to do this at all. So let's see if that fixes my statistics at all. Let's see if it even works. No, it deadlocks. Okay. So my idea for that improvement did not help. I don't know why I need to do this. Okay. Well, anyway, this will improve my instruction count by like 1 or 2, maybe. All right, cool. So yeah, that's sequence sorter. Had a super great time with that, as long as it took me. And yeah, so I'll see you next time for stored image decoder.